Hi, I'm less truly outrageous and more truly hungover. Andrew, and this is Gayties Toys. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, we're going to the pink aisle again. This time, Jem, who is probably the most 80s of all 80s cartoons and toys. It was really like encapsulated the MTV of it all at the moment. So, this is a character we're going to start with, is someone who never made it out. And we didn't really have much information on, but there is, quite a few other dolls that didn't actually make it to market in 1986. If you don't know what a gem is, you are missing out. Jem and the Holograms came out in 1985. But it was both a doll line from Hasbro as well as a cartoon from sort of Sunbow Marvel Productions. So, in essence, it was part of the Transformers G.I. Joe verse, which is weird. Rather than, the more sci-fi elements of Transformers and G.I. Joe, Jem was much more about, sort of the simpler rock star life, and that being a very complex, messy bee. Jem was in fact Jerrica Benton, whose late father gave her a record company, a mansion, she had an orphanage on the side, and then on top of that, he gave her this highly intelligent AI that looked like her likewise dead mother. And this AI could generate holograms over her. So she took this and made a rock star personality. We're not sure why. We don't know why Jerrica herself never just became a rock star, but she had to create Jem to be the headliner of her own, record company. And they were very much, just the top dog of the music industry. But they did have rivals. The first being the Misfits, who were sort of the Go-Go's to their Bangles, just, absolute, just monsters. And, obviously my faves. Both the cartoon and the doll line were, reasonably successful. However, Hasbro did not account for Mattel. There was an unwritten rule at the time, and even, up until a couple years ago, that certain companies were dominant in certain things. And Mattel, being, the Barbie makers, felt very threatened by Jem's introduction, and they raced to the market with Barbie and the Rockers, essentially just to knock Jem right through her knees. Which goes to show you that, if you want to win a bar fight, you call the Misfits or you call the Mattel's girls brand. As such, Jem didn't really have the longevity of, say, Barbie. Whereas Barbie could be anything to anyone at any time, Jem was really kind of pigeonholed into this, kind of rock star / orphanage owner trope, so her line was sort of ill-fated. It lasted for a good solid 2 years, but by 1988, numbers had declined. And this is where we start to, we're going to talk about Graphix, the topic of today's MIA 80s Ladies. So the 1988 line, that full wave, was very robust. It had a number of gems, potentially maybe a new pizzazz. There was a lot of characters that were eventually introduced into the cartoon. We had Astral, Regine, people like this who were very late in the cartoon, but at least they made it in. That said, Hasbro kind of saw the writing on the wall already, so they started to pare it down quite a bit, and eventually they were just sort of saying, we're cutting out the band members, we're cutting out the evil friends, we're cutting out everybody but just, a couple gems and her friends specifically. And even that never came to pass. On the topic of the villain's friends, that's where Graphix sort of, gets a little muddy in what we know about her. In the early 2000s, someone who had worked on the Jem team had released pictures of this prototype of a doll that no one had ever seen before. Over the years, at various Jem cons or in interviews, Christy Marks, the head writer of Jem, the creator of most of the actual characteristics of them, had sort of come out and said, there was a prototype. There was sort of talks about including her in the cartoon, not necessarily the movie that was planned, but scrapped after the disaster of Transformers the movie. But she was the first to go. She was never really intended or planned for the 1988 wave. That said, people sort of tried to fill in the blanks and sort of try to see, who was she, who was her faction, who was she supposed to be with. Over the years, we have learned that she was essentially a graphic artist, and this is 80s graphic artist. There was no computers necessarily. She was really, a print star, as well as a graffiti artist, supposedly. And she was hired by Eric Raymond, the Misfits manager, to work with the Misfits, but then also his new band, the Stingers, another group of dolls that were supposed to come out late in '88 but never did, but did, however, feature quite heavily in the cartoon. Graphix's real name was Gwendolyn Gwen Snyder. She was this just spoiled, airheaded, mean, selfish person. I mean, these are the words of Christy Marks, not me. Nevertheless, my kind of girl. She was going to work for the Misfits and Stingers, but she would eventually sort of become a roadie of the Stingers, much like Clash became a roadie of the Misfits. And Graphix would really sort of, kind of almost develop a crush on Riot, the lead singer, but then also another band member, Rapture. The two of them really like screwing with people. Her prototype was an interesting affair. She came with what looked like a really dumb little pinwheel, and apparently it was a video distorter that would sort of ruin Jem's concerts. She wore kind of like red velvet miniskirt, boots, very yellow blonde hair with polka dots through it, and then this just hideous white jumpsuit with what it looks like a children's bedroom pattern on it. I mean, if this is the graphic designer, you do get what you pay for. I feel like the big mystique around Graphix and the answers we didn't know for so long is really sort of why I zeroed in on picking her first versus the entire other wave of characters that were to be done. They kind of had their shot. Graphix did not. And it's that sort of, just mystery and being truly the only character in the entire line just to be outright canceled by Hasbro and like yanked from Christy Marx's play, sandbox in the cartoon. That's what kind of makes her special, and that's what I really kind of like latch onto here. The final verdict here is great, and I love a happy ending for a final verdict. If you're watching this as a Jem fan, you already know this. You know it better than I do, to be honest. If you're not, you might not be familiar with that Integrity Toys, which is one of the top tier adult collectible doll companies. Had gotten the Jem license for many, many years. I mean, in boy terms, this is the Masters of the Universe Classics for Jem. I mean, they made every character. They made so many different looks. I mean, of course, not all of them from the cartoon, but so many. Every single character got a very hearty, healthy representation. And in August of 2016, Graphix was announced, and the next year she was released in very small numbers, making her probably one of the more rare and the biggest gets kind of thing. She did sell out quite quickly, but I think most of them did, to be honest. Integrity's Graphix did without that stupid pinwheel. They did give her a spray can, sort of really harkening back to her graffiti artist humble beginnings. And just her inclusion really solidified her as, a main character, and especially building out the Stingers world. Likewise, IDW briefly ran a Jem and the Holograms comic that was really great. Like, I do recommend it if you ever do get a chance to get the trade paperbacks. Short-lived, very good. And she appeared just once, but did have a very, different look, let's say, like most of them. But it was, again, great to see her thriving in the 2000s, whereas, Hasbro and, the cartoon weren't terribly kind to her. And that's our look at Graphix from Jem. There's many more Jem characters we'll get to. I would love to see these as action figures. As much as, the doll line is fabulous, I picked up a few. It wasn't for me. I would recommend, if you don't already, to look up Morning Wolf on Instagram. I'll link him below. He has done a line of Jem action figures, sort of customized out of Marvel Legends action figures, and you can really see the potential there. So if, Hasbro, if Super 7, if anybody wants to do them, I'm in, and I would love to see Graphix in there too. So thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you next time on Gayties Toys.